بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. Tonight's lesson is on Lu Lu Wal Marjan فيما اتفق عليه الشيخان, and alhamdulillah one of the disciples was generous enough to think about us and also to buy us a gift and to be kind with his wealth and let alone the weight. And this is a copy of Lu Lu Wal Marjan. This is an all Arabic version, pretty good sized book. This is one of the newer copies, and of the modern copies, this is one of, if not the best edited version. Tahqiq. The tahqiq of the book was done by Abi Amr Abdul Karim Ibn Ahmed Al-Hajuri Al-Umari. Alhamdulillah, I was fortunate enough to meet him when I was in Yemen. He visited Masjid Sharqain, and I also visited him in Jami al-Khair. He did a lecture there one night. Very beneficial lecture, alhamdulillah. طيب. From the Tulab of the Maj, he made the tahqiq of the book. And I actually picked up this book when I was in Yemen, but back then it was in 3 volumes, but 2 books. 3 volumes, but 2 books. Now they condensed it all into just 1 book. So if you get a chance to get your hand on this print, alhamdulillah, has all of the vowels or the diacritical marks, the tashkilat. It's good quality print. Darul Athar in Sana'a. Inshallah ta'ala, pick up this copy. For those brothers and sisters who are trying to memorize the book, if you want a version that's in all Arabic, inshallah ta'ala, this is a very good copy to have. He donated 4 books to us, alhamdulillah. Of course, take mine first and foremost. That's how the spoils are divided. The leader does what? He takes the pick of the litter of the spoils. Then the soldiers get what? Their share accordingly, Accordingly. Don't forget that word. Accordingly. Inshallah. Who will get these 3 books? Allahu Alam. We had some brothers that were lusting over the books. Plotting on the books, scheming on the books. And I tried to advise him, قُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ يَغُضُّوا مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِمْ. Tell the believing men to do what? Lower their gaze. The Shaykh, that was my dalil from the Quran. Alright? His dalil was from the aql, intellect. He said, it's not a woman. He said, it's not a mar'a. And then I said, this is what? Hadi aftan min al mar'a. This is even more charming than a what? Than a woman. These 3 books are even more charming than a woman. Khairan, inshallah. So if you get a chance to pick up this version, inshallah, it'll help you out. Bidnillah, jazakumullah khairan. Alright, enough of that. Last thing that we did, I believe it was the hadith regarding the deceased person being punished in the grave because of the family members crying over them. The family members wailing and excessively crying and screaming and raising their voices over the dead will be a means of them being punished in their graves. If I'm not mistaken, we read all of those hadiths along with the sharh of the ulama of Islam and what they actually have to say regarding that issue. What does that mean? Was the ta'wil of those ahadith. Khairun inshaAllah ta'ala. Chapter number 10. It states, باب التشديد في النياحة. حديث عائشة رضي الله عنها قالت لما جاء النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قتل بن حارثة وجعفر وابن رواحة جلس يعرف فيه الهزن وأنا أنظر من صائر الباب شق الباب فأتاه رجل فقال إن نساء جعفر وذكر بكاءهن فأمره أن ينهاهن فذهب ثم أتاه الثانية لم يطعنه فقال انههن فأتاه الثالثة قال والله غلبننا يا رسول الله فزعمت أنه قال فحث في أفواههن التراب فقلت أرغم الله أنفك لم تفعل ما أمرك ما أمرك رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ولم تترك رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم من العناء. It says here to wail excessively. التشديد في النياحة. To wail excessively. The Arabic is a bit off from the English. The Arabic clearly says at-tashdid, the severity, the gravity of an-niyaha, of wailing over the deceased, expressing your sadness, your grief, and your mourning in a way which is against the teachings of the Quran and the Sunnah, an-niyaha. And it says in English to wail excessively. What about it? The permissibility of wailing excessively? The impermissibility of wailing excessively? The recommendation of wailing excessively? So it should say, at-tashdid, the severe threat, the severe punishment, the impermissibility of wailing excessively. Everyone understand this? That's what it should say. Khairan inshallah. So Abu Sa'id, let me ask you a question. If the Messenger of Allah sallallahu, if Allah honored us with His noble presence, would the people sit and talk about worldly things? And raise their voices? And have a casual conversation? You think any Muslim would? Tayyib. No matter how important or satisfying that conversation may be. The ulama of Islam, they say that when there's a circle of hadith, a majlis of hadith, a halaqah, a class of hadith, you are to give it the same amount of respect as you would give the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The same amount of reverence that you would give to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So let's be mindful of that, inshallah ta'ala. Let alone the etiquette of a class, someone is speaking, someone is trying to teach something beneficial. Or many of the questions that brothers have on a daily basis are oftentimes explained in the classes in which you're what? Sitting, or your phone is ringing, or anything like this. You find strange things. I don't understand this. If you don't like the speaker, or the speaker is not good enough for you, that's fine. But at least the what? The ilm should be respected. Everyone understand this or not? So we should be mindful of that, huh? Khairan inshallah. Moving forward. It says here, narrated Aisha radiallahu anha. And before we go into hadith number 540, wailing over the dead in an excessive manner, or just wailing, period. Crying is one thing. Wailing is a different story. And one of the wisdoms, or one of the reasons why it's impermissible and it's a major sin, is because it's a manifestation of lack of sabr. And it's a manifestation of a person having a type of lack of content and lack of a person being pleased with Allah's qadr. Allah's qadr in general. If something bad happens to you, a calamity, a tragedy, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be pleased with it. It's not obligatory for you to be pleased with getting into a car accident, your car is totaled, and you're injured, or you injured other people. You don't have to be what? Pleased with it, Abdul Aqib. But you have to be pleased with Allah's qadr what? As a whole. The maqdur is one thing, and the qadr is a different thing. But there are certain acts and statements when a person does, which may carry on not just to the maqdur, but the qadr itself. Okay, I understand that you're hurting, you're upset, you're mourning, it was your husband, your father, but Allah took him. Khalas. Allah caused death. He wasn't going to live forever. You didn't own him, you did not possess him. He was a servant of Allah. There has to come a time in which the brakes come on. And the wailing and the screaming and the scratching and the cursing and the throwing things has to stop. It has to stop. And if it doesn't, then the indicator comes on that you may have, we say may have, a lack of rida bil qadr. A lack of being pleased with Allah's qadr. And being pleased with the qadr of Allah is a branch of being pleased with Allah. Everyone understand this? So this is one of the reasons why it is such a severe threat, therefore. Another reason is that wailing over the dead, screaming and scratching and all of these things, it is a manifestation of jahiliyyah. Al-jahiliyyah al-ula. That's what they used to do. The pagans and the heathens, the mushrikun. Everyone understand this? They would go extreme in wailing over the dead and mourning the dead. And they would do things and they would say things that they didn't even necessarily have to do. They didn't have to do them from the get-go. Many people, they may say, I have to mourn, I want to mourn. But they don't actually have to. But they're doing it because it's an option and it's there. And it's the custom. And if you don't do it, someone will accuse you of not loving your husband, of not being loyal to your leader, so on and so forth. And that's Jahiliyyah. So this is some of the wisdoms why this is impermissible. And this is some of the wisdoms why, or these are some of the wisdoms why it is a major sin. Khairan, inshallah. Hadith number 540 is narrated by Aisha radiyallahu ta'ala anha. When the Prophet ﷺ got the news of the death of Zayd ibn Haritha, Ja'far, and Ibn Rawaha, he sat down and looked sad. And I was looking at him through the chink of the door. A man came and told me about the crying of the women of Ja'far, the women of Ja'far. The Prophet ﷺ ordered him to forbid them. The man went and came back saying that he had told them, but they did not listen to him. The Prophet ﷺ said, forbid them. So again he went and came back for the third time and said, O Allah's Messenger by Allah, they did not listen to us at all. Aisha radiallahu anha added, Allah's Messenger ﷺ ordered him to go and put dust in their mouths. I said to that man, may Allah stick your nose in the dust, i.e. humiliate you. You could neither persuade the women to fulfill the order of Allah's Messenger ﷺ, nor did you relieve Allah's Messenger's distress. Allahu Akbar. You know, this hadith is in Bukhari and Muslim. Something from the what? The seriousness of what? Of Aisha. You did nothing right. You couldn't persuade these women, nor could you fulfill the commandments of the Prophet. May Allah stick your what? Your nose in dust. May Allah protect us from that. Khairan, inshallah. Next hadith is hadith 541. حديث عطية رضي الله عنها قالت أخذ علينا النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم عند البيعة ألا ننوح فما وفت من امرأة غير 5 نسوة أم سليم وأم العلاء وابنة أبي سبرة وامرأة معاذ وامرأتين أو ابنة أبي سبرة وامرأة معاذ وامرأة أخرى. Narrated Atiyah رضي الله عنها, at the time of giving the bay'ah, pledge to the Prophet ﷺ, one of the conditions was that we would not wail. But it was not fulfilled except by 5 women. And they were Sulaym, al-Ala, the daughter of Abi Sabra, the wife of Mu'adh, and 2 other women, or the daughter of Abi Sabra and the wife of Mu'adh and another woman. Hadith 542. حديث عطية رضي الله عنها أنها قالت بايعنا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فقرأ علينا أن لا يشركن بالله شيئا ونهانا عن النياحة فقبضت امرأة يدها فقالت أسعدتني فلانة أريد أن أجزي and prohibited. And the Messenger of Allah صلى الله عليه وسلم warned, and the Messenger of Allah صلى الله عليه وسلم stipulated upon the believing women not to perform this practice of jahiliyyah, and that is wailing over the dead, scream of doing so, and that this is the sunnah of the Messenger of Allah alayhi salatu wasalam. And he made a stipulation, he made a stipulation upon him with regards to the bay'ah, it being accepted or not to do this, Everyone clear on this or not? Everybody clear on this? So that's the main ruling from these ahadith. طيب. Now let's go back and dissect some of these ahadith inshallah ta'ala, piece by piece. عبد الرقيب أين الشرح النووي؟ أين وضعت الكتاب؟ الطبعة الجديدة التي كانت معنا بعد فقدان الكتاب القديم الأول. فهمتها؟ يختلف عن القديم. أين هو خالد؟ لا 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 هو موجود هنا. هو هناك تحت الدرة الربيعية فوق هناك تحت اي نعم شوف صحيح بارك الله فيك. طيب, moving forward. So narration number 1 is reported by Aisha radiallahu anha, and we benefit from this narration many things. First and foremost is that the Prophet ﷺ was a human being, and he experienced sadness like other human beings experience. And there's nothing wrong with a person being sad in Islam. Now, you being excessively sad, that sadness leading to depression, chronic depression, clinical depression, constant depression, that sadness forcing you to say something that you're not supposed to say, forcing you to do something that you're not supposed to do, prevents you from doing something that you're supposed to say or do, now the sadness becomes problematic. And this emotion, you can say the same with other emotions. With other what? Emotions. Everyone understand this? Other emotions that many people they find problematic with regards to the practice of Islam today. I was naturally like this. I naturally want this. I'm afraid like this by nature. I'm a cowardly person. The natural emotion or the natural feeling is not necessarily always the thing to blame. But it's what that thing forces you to do or prevents you from doing. So there lies no doubt there's some brothers who are naturally born and they're courageous by nature. Lion heart, as they say, metaphorically. Some brothers just brave by nature. And there's some brothers who are just scared. They're a bit cowardly. They're afraid. They never got over being afraid and scared of the dark. Monsters under the bed. It continue even when they what? When they grew up. They might be a little what? Faint-hearted or what? Queasy. What heck everyone understand this? So when it comes to the battlefield, this brother on the right, he's charged up. He's saying, Bismillah, Allahu Akbar. Allah will give us victory. Let's go. And he starts hitting his axe on his shield, right? And I'm there, what? Shivering and shaking, spitting up and throwing up. But I'm there on the battlefield. When it's time to charge and move forward, he's saying, Allahu Akbar. And I'm still spitting up, tripping, dropping my shield, dropping my axe. But when the moment comes, I say, what? I raise my hands, oh Allah, give me strength. I take a deep breath, what? And I go out. And I'm struck down in the cause of Allah. I died, inshallah, in the cause of Allah. And I was afraid and I was scared. So that fear, it didn't prevent me from doing what? Doing what I was supposed to do. So is a person going to be punished for being afraid? Or is a person going to be punished for turning his back? وَمَنْ يُوَلِّهِمْ يَوْمَئِذٍ دُبُرَهُ. He who turns his back on that day. What tawalli? Yawm al-zahf. Mukhtar? 7 destructive sins. Give me the isnad of that hadith. Ahlul hadith. Where's the hifd, yaqi? You did a talk on that with the isnad. طيب, al-muhim. So therefore the emotion is one thing. What the emotion gets you to do, what the emotion prevents you from doing is what? Different story. And this is a tremendously important principle. Some people, they may say, well, I was girly from day one. I was born like, feminine. I was born. That's how I am. That's how I hold my hands. That's how I talk. That's how I was born. Is Allah going to punish me for that? Not necessarily. But Allah is going to punish you for you imitating a woman intentionally. And you not trying to imitate a man. And you not striving to break it. As the Prophet ﷺ says, لَعَنَ اللَّهُ الْمُتَشَبِّهِينَ مِنَ الرِّجَالِ بِالنِّسَاءِ وَالْمُتَشَبِّهَةِ مِنَ النِّسَاءِ بِالرِّجَالِ. So one who makes tashabbuh, who tries to be like, and he doesn't attempt to break it, that's punished. So the concept of the LGBTQ, the concept of a person having, they asked the question, I have a very strong sex drive. Remember they asked that question. It's not necessarily something you're going to be punished for. Your strong sex drive, your insatiable appetite for intercourse, that causes you to make zina, that's a different story. It causes you not to live with your wife properly, that's a what? That's a different story. But the sheer desire or the feeling or the emotion is not necessarily, sometimes it could be, but it's not necessarily the thing to what? To blame. But it is al-fi'lu al-mutaratib alayhi. Everyone understand this or not? And this, and the understanding of this principle can prevent you from many, many problematic issues when people attack Islam. Everyone understands? For him to have that? So the Prophet was sad. There's nothing wrong with being what? Sad. But you allow yourself to be sad for a month straight. in which you don't pray, you don't fast, you don't make zakat, you don't do anything because you're so sad. You don't get out the bed. You allow yourself to become further and far and so on. That's a different what? That's a different story. Everyone understand the difference? Moving forward. This hadith also shows us that the Messenger of Allah والسلام, had care and concern and sympathy and compassion for his companions. And that's the mark of a true leader. That's the mark of a true leader. Everyone understand this? That's a mark of a true leader in Islam and outside of Islam. And we know that when the general or the commander or the colonel or the leader, when he looks after his troops and his soldiers like they're his own flesh and blood, his own son, his own brothers, then we know there's going to be a great deal of loyalty and sacrifice made for the general. Everyone understand this? We all know what Sun Tzu said. Treat your soldiers kindly. Treat them as if they're your own sons. And some of the commentators and some of the earlier translations of The Art of War, they mention a very interesting story from ancient China. And that was one day, there was a woman who was a widow. And she was in the company of other women. And their sons were conscripted into the army. And he went out to fight. And then the news came back from the front of the battle. Who was wounded, who died, who was victorious, etc. So, the news of the woman who was a widow, of her son being wounded with an arrow, but he survived. And the arrow was poisoned. The arrowhead had a poison tip on it. So, the woman, she brought the news to the widow, and she said that your son was wounded by a poisoned arrow, and guess what happened? She said, what? She said the general, the great general of the army himself, he removed the arrow, and he sucked the poison out of the wound and the pus out of the wound. So the widow, she started crying, she started breaking down, weeping. So the woman who brought her the news, and the other woman, it says, like, what's wrong with you? Are you a fool? Your son is nothing more than a peasant. He's a simple, single conscripted soldier among thousands of people in the army, and the general himself looked after him and took care of his wounds and so on and so forth. So the woman who's a widow, she says, no, you're the fool. She says, I'll never see my son again. Even though he survived the first wound, I'll never see him again. It says, how do you know this? He's lucky, he's protected, he got shot and he's still alive. She says, that's the last thing I'll ever hear of my son. And it says, how do you know this? She said that many years ago, my husband fought for the same general. He was wounded fighting behind that general. The general did the same thing for him, and he never ever left the general's side. He gave his total and absolute fealty and loyalty to that general, since the general showed him so much care and compassion himself. Now he's done that to my son, I'll never see my son again. I.e., the son will do what? He'll stay by the general's side no matter what? No matter what, he'll fight to the death. He'll sacrifice himself for the general because of the general's what? I don't understand this story. There's tremendous wisdom. She was sad because she knew that her son was now what? It's over. Look at the sihr, the sorcery and the magic of the general. A little bit of compassion, a little bit of care can go a very long way in a soldier's heart. Just think about this in the United States. They show you those old war films, the old footage, and they show you Eisenhower, right? Or Patton, or this general, this president on the boat with the troops, shaking their hands, talking to them. And they're all eager to see the president and to talk to the president. That gives them something. They feel, wow, the president of the United States came to see us. The general himself shook our hands. The general himself, he's sitting in the trenches with us, eating a can of sardines and hot dogs and beans. And he can have a nice, warm, fresh, hot meal. But he's eating the rations with us. That gives them a spirit of what? Morale. Everyone understand this? So the Prophet ﷺ, he was sad when his companions were killed. He felt the compassion. And it's one of the reasons why they were what? So loyal to the Prophet ﷺ. Everyone understand this? And this is universal wisdom that can be applied all around the board. You want your sons to be with you, to respect you, to love you, then do the things that they do. You want your children to obey you. You want your children to look after you. Sit down, play video games with them. Play Legos with them. Don't just take them to the park and let them play with the ball. You go out there and play with the ball, kick the ball around with the children. Involve yourselves with the children. Show them that you love them, that you care for them. And show them that what makes them happy makes you happy. And what causes them sadness makes you what? Sad as well. Have a joke contest with the kids. You don't have to do that. We don't have to say that. But the kids, let them have fun and show them that I'm not what? Just Abi or Brother Fulan or Sheikh Mufti. But I can what? Have a good time with you as well. And know for sure that the kids, they'll never what? Abadan. Inshallah, they grow up 50, 60, 70 years old and say, wow, I remember when Brother Khalid played soccer with us. I remember when Brother Abu Saeed did this with us. I remember when Uncle Mufti, what? Did that with us. And perhaps being the night ta'ala, that will have an effect in keeping them upon the what? The straight path, knowing that they're loved. Everyone understand this? So this is a tremendous concept of tarbiyah from the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. And we said outside of Islam as well, the wise people, the skilled people, the experienced people of the dunya, they say the same thing. Treat your soldiers as if they're what? As if they're your own children. As if they're your own flesh and blood, and they will follow you what? No matter what? What? If you have a student, if you have a disciple, if you have someone that you're teaching and training, make them feel that love as well. And bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, hopefully if there's any good in them, they will what? Remain loyal. That's, we said if there's what? If there's any good in them. As far as if they're scum, and if they're vile, and if they're low, if they don't know any loyalty or respect, then the first opportunity they will what? Stab you in the back. And start talking about you. I never was studying with him. He was just helping me out. Oh, Brother Muhammad ibn Munir, not Mufti, Brother Muhammad ibn Munir, he was helping me with Arabic a little bit. He showed me a couple books. That's what it becomes. But back then it was what? Sheikh, teach me the book. Now it's what? You know, he was alright, you know. He helped me out a little bit, right, Abu Saeed? But we're what? We're equal. And the only difference between me and you is that you speak Arabic and I don't. That's what somebody said once. It's the only difference between me and you. You're fluent in Arabic and I'm not. Other than that is what? Same. And we have stories after stories after stories, what? After story. So if there's good in the disciple, he'll what? He'll appreciate the pus being sucked out the arm. And as far as if he's a low-based person, you can what? Give him a blood transfusion, give him your kidney, your liver, he won't what? He won't appreciate anything. Khalid, isn't that so? Right, moving forward. Khairan, inshallah. So therefore, the other companion, he saw that the Messenger of Allah alayhi salatu wasalam was sad and he was distressed. Naam? And then we have the news of the women of Ja'far, i.e. his wives, his daughters, anyone that was under his guardianship, nisa'ahu, his women. They were hit very heavily by the loss of Ja'far, and they began to cry. It says, وَذَكَرَ بُكَاءَهُنَّ. And obviously, we know that buka is not haram, as we've explained already. Crying isn't haram. But perhaps what's meant by وَذَكَرَ بُكَاءَهُنَّ يعني مَعَ النِّيَاحَةِ الْبُكَاء الْمَقْرُونَ بِالنِّيَاحَةِ. The crying that was accompanied by the wailing and the screaming, etc. And then he told him, stop them. Inhahunna. Don't allow them to do that. Tell them to stop. To the end of the hadith. And we all know that Aisha radiallahu anha, in this hadith, and in many other hadiths, was very fierce. And she would take a very staunch position against anyone who didn't obey the Prophet ﷺ in the way in which she thought he should be obeyed, so on and so forth. Khairan, inshallah ta'ala. Hadith al-Ma'atiyah shows that not crying and not wailing over the dead was one of the conditions of the bay'ah, the oath of allegiance that the Muslims were to give the Messenger of Allah alayhi salatu wasalam. And the reason behind it is that it's a manifestation of al-jahiliyyah. And the Prophet, he wanted to abolish what? Al-jahiliyyah. Moving forward. Then we have the third narration of the chapter, Hadith 542, another version of Atiyah's narration, with regards to, it says, أسعدتني فلانة أريد أن أجزيها. That they used to pay back favors. That when a woman became a widow, when a woman lost her son or her brother, the other woman would get up, say poetry, scream, cry, mention the virtues of the man that was killed on the battlefield. then the woman had to do what? Pay them back. When they were torn into pieces, crying, the woman would stand up and do it for her. So she says that Fulana did that for me. So I agree to the stipulation, but I have to pay her back. And the Prophet ﷺ what? He did what? What did he do? What did he do? What does the narration say, Khalid? He did what? Huh? He allowed her to do it, or he turned away from her? What happened? Read the narration. The Prophet did not what? Object to that. Everyone understand this? The Prophet didn't what? فما قال لها النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم شيئا فانطلقت ورجعت فبايعها. The Prophet didn't say anything. فانطلقت. She went and then she did what? Came back and then he what? Gave her the Pledge of Allegiance. Why did the Prophet ﷺ do this? Naam? And what's the purpose of this? Tayyib, had to know we. Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala, he says regarding this chapter, فيه دليل على تحريم النياحة وهو مجمع عليه وفيه صحة التوبة ما لم يمت المكلف ولم يصل إلى الغرغرة. He says these hadiths, they prove the impermissibility of an-niyaha, wailing. And there's no difference of opinion among any scholar that this is haram. There's no khilaf that this is totally impermissible. Khairan inshaAllah ta'ala. Moving forward. He says here, وأمره صلى الله عليه وسلم ذلك مبالغة في إنكار البكاء عليهم ومنعهن منه. كذا إنكار البكاء عليهم كذا هكذا مكتوب ومنعهن منه. ثم تأوله بعضهم على أنه كان بكاء بنوح وصياح. ولهذا تأكد النهي ولو كان مجرد دمع العين لم ينهى عنه لأنه صلى الله عليه وسلم فعله وأخبر أنه ليس بحرام وأنه رحمة. وتأوله بعضهم على أنه كان بكاء من غير نياحة ولا صوت. قال ويبعد أن الصحابيات يتمادين بعد تكرار نهينا على محرم وإنما كان بكاء مجردا والنهي عنه تنزيه وأدب لا للتحريم فلهذا أصررنا عليه متأولات. Now, the narration Abu Sa'id about the death of Ja'far and how his women were crying. We said that perhaps, or one can say that was meant by them crying, as that it was crying accompanied with what? Wailing. And it can't just be crying because the Prophet himself cried and he says it's not haram and it's a means of mercy. Correct? That's one way of looking at it. But if you say that they were crying and wailing and the Prophet told them to stop and the second time and so on and so forth, how do they keep doing it over and over again? Is that befitting of the Sahabiyat? The Prophet says don't do it. Someone brings them the news and they keep doing it. Would they continue to do that? So what's meant by this, Khalid? Either we're going to say, number one, is that they weren't just crying, but they were wailing, and the Prophet told them not to. But that leaves the door open for the problem. The Prophet told them to stop, and they what? Kept doing it. Or they were just crying, but what does it mean when the Prophet says, inhahunna, stop them? Some say is that it wasn't haram for them to cry, but the Prophet just wanted them to stop crying to show them and to teach them a lesson, and it's unlikely for those companions to keep doing something that they knew was against the will of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allahu alam. That's problematic. The Prophet cried, he allowed people to cry, and he told the women to stop crying, stop crying, stop crying. Why? If the Prophet was a man who cried, why would he stop women from crying? He felt that it may elevate. Perhaps. Not a bad solution. Perhaps. Tight. Moving forward. Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, أرغم الله أنفك معناه أنك قاصر لا تقوم بما أمرت به من إنكاره لنقصك وتقصيرك ولا تخبر النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم بقصورك عن ذلك حتى يرسل غيرك ويستريح من العناء والعناء طيب إلى آخره. قوله قال رحمه الله: هذا محمول على الترخيص لمعطية في آل فلان خاصة كما هو ظاهر، ولا تحل النياحة لغيرها ولا لها في غير آل فلان كما هو صريح في الحديث، وللشارع أن يخص من العموم ما شاء، فهذا صواب الحكم في هذا الحديث. واستشكل القاضي عياض وغيره هذا الحديث وقالوا فيه أقوالا عجيبة، ومقصود التحذير من الاغترار بها، حتى إن بعض المالكية قال النياحة ليست بحرام بهذا الحديث. وقصة نساء جعفر قالوا: وإنما المحرم ما كان معه شيء من أفعال الجاهلية كشق الجيوب وخمش الخدود ودعوى الجاهلية، والصواب ما ذكرناه أولا، وأن النياحة حرام مطلقا، وهو مذهب العلماء كافة، وليس في من قال وهذا القائل دليل صحيح لما ذكره والله أعلم. طيب, listen very carefully. Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala, he says about that last narration about the is'ad. أسعدتني فلانة وأريد أن أجزيها. That Fulana, when my husband died, when my son died, when my brother died, she wailed and cried over him, so I have to pay her back. And the Prophet did not object to it. That's also problematic. How could the Prophet ﷺ allow her to do that after we've said that it is haram and it's impermissible and it's a major sin? Khalid. What's the solution to that? I want Mukhtar. Even so, can you pay back a haram debt? Something that's clearly haram? The Prophet allow you to do it after he says don't do it? I just have one more time I have to go back and make zina. I owe her. Would that work? He said, my girlfriend. One last time, what? What? She's waiting for me right now. After that, I won't make it no more. Would that work, Muhammad? Would that be permissible? Mal Jawab, what's the answer? Nawawi rahimahullah, he says regarding that this is interpreted to mean is that it was a special allowance for Atiyah. As if Atiyah was the what? Was the woman. But in this narration, Lu Lu Wal Marjan, she didn't mention what? That it was her. Listen carefully. Read the hadith again. Read the hadith. It says what? فَقَبَضَتِ امْرَأَةٌ يَدَهَا. That a woman did what? She didn't put out her hand. Meaning it's what? One thing left before I give my agreement. What was that thing? فَقَالَتْ, she said, Fulana did the same for me, I have to what? Return the favor. No, he says in the sharh here that was what? Atiyah. And she didn't mention her name being that woman. Everyone clear on this? Moving forward. No, he says this means is that it was only permissible for Atiyah. And that it is not permissible to wail over the dead, period. This was an exception just for Atiyah. And the Messenger of Allah ﷺ can single out someone with the ruling how he sees what? Fit, based off of the need and the necessity. Waqi'at ayn. An individual or isolated incident. Nah? No way, he says. This is the correct view regarding this hadith. Other scholars who came before An-Nawawi, such as Qadi Iyadh, who was Maliki, the Madhab wars, what did he say? He said that this hadith is problematic. And he says all different interpretations. Nawawi says, وَمَقْصُودِ التَّحْذِيرُ مِنَ الْإِغْتِرَارِ بِهَا. He says the only thing that I want here is to warn people from falling victim to those statements of Qadi Iyadh. Allahu Akbar. There is no scholar whose word is what? Written in golden ink. Everyone understand this? And that's the mark of a true scholar, and someone who isn't afraid or scared of another scholar, and to speak the truth. If you ask him a question about what Sheikh Fulan says, and it's in a private setting, and he says, A'udhu Billah, this speech is false, This speech is impermissible. This speech is harmful. This speech is nonsense. No, you don't have to do or say anything. And then you go and say, yeah, Sheikh Fulan said it. And he starts to stutter and drop things on the floor. And then say, oh, go ahead and do it. How much respect can you have for that scholar? Everyone understand this? It's a huge difference. If a person says, I don't know about that, I don't agree. And then he says, well, Abu Sa'id said it. I know Abu Sa'id has a great deal of ilm, respect. Well, maybe. Let me look into it. No, before I knew Abu Sa'id said it, I said it was what? Rubbish. A'udhu billah. No way. Whoever said that doesn't know what he's talking about. And then he comes back and says, Abu Sa'id said it. I don't know what. It's a serious problem. It's a what? It's a serious problem. And that wasn't the style and the behavior of the what? Of the ulama of the past. At-tahdhiru min al-ightirari biha. What I want to do is not talk about Qadhi, disrespect him, but warn someone from being the victim of those false what? Statements and interpretations. Because the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ is what? Fawq al-jamiyah. Is above everybody. There's no scholar who's above the ruling of the Quran and Sunnah. Everyone understand this? And this belief does not necessitate, stipulate, does not require any disrespect to any alim. Everyone understand this? And we ask Allah to purify our hearts. Those who say that you can't make this statement, that no one has absolute obedience except for the Messenger of Allah. A student of knowledge supposedly made this statement. Such an awful ascription to the Islamic University of Medina. Sad and unfortunate. That someone who went to that school and graduated from that school says you can't make that statement. That there's no scholar who has absolute obedience. Ta'a mutlaqa illa rasul. And you can't say that. That's a mistake to say that. Shahad al-kalam al-fadhi. You understand this? If a person says that there's no one who has what? Absolute obedience except for what? The Messenger of Allah. And then someone comes along and says that statement is what? That's wrong. It's a sad time in which we live. Everyone understand this? No way. He then says, rahimahullah. He says some Maliki scholars, they even say, meaning that those Maliki scholars, they did what? اغتروا بكلام القاضي. They read his interpretation of the hadith and they fell into what Nawawi is saying don't fall into. Some of them, they say that niyaha isn't haram. That it's not haram to wail over the dead. It's not haram to wail over the dead. Why? They say what? The story of the women of Ja'far. And the only thing that's haram of wailing is wailing which involves ripping, scratching, and tearing. Based off of what? That interpretation of Qadhi Iyadh. Everyone understand this? Nawawi rahimahullah, he then says, and this is wrong. And what we've mentioned is correct. And that niyaha is absolutely what? Impermissible. And that's the view of the overwhelming majority of the ulama. Al-ulama kafatan. Everyone understand this? And he says, and those who say other than that have no correct dalil to stand upon. That's madhab al-salaf. Everyone understand this? That's the madhab al-salaf. Is the dalil, the principles, and understanding the dalil, and not who and where and fulan, sheikh fulan, and brother fulan. But science. That's it. There's no prejudice and biasness. If you're a great scholar and you say something that's wrong based off of the Quran and Sunnah and the principles of the Quran and Sunnah, we say what? May Allah have mercy on you. You made a mistake. And we have someone who's a student of knowledge or who isn't a scholar or isn't as a great scholar as this one, and he says something that's what? That's right. According to Quran and Sunnah and the principles of Quran and Sunnah, we say what? Jazakallahu khairan. There is no everything you say is right and everything you say is wrong. It doesn't exist in the world of what? Of Ahl al-Hadith. Everyone understand this? Wallahu Azza wa Jal A'lam. How many examples have we mentioned of this, Khalid, in this sharh alone? And this is the end of this volume as well. We will stop here tonight.